I think one of the first steps being reform or changing, you have to admit that you was an abuser. It you you inflicted this or you caused this, you done it. That's the first step.
Hi, I'm Tara Woodlee, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors, where we discuss topics related to survivors and abuse and how, as a community, we can overcome the challenges and the stigmas of domestic violence. And today I have a really special guest. I met him back in October at Be Free to Fly symposium event, and I was just amazed by how he spoke and his journey. So we asked Rodney Owens to come, and he is actually a former abuser that turned advocate for men's recovery. So in 2005, Rodney received a powerful vision, and it was to guide men on their path to recovery. This vision became his reality in 2008 as he dedicated himself to supporting men and finding their pathway to serenity. Rodney's passion for men's recovery drives him to be a positive role model, showing that transformation is possible. Join us as we explore Rodney's journey today and his story of redemption. Without further ado, Rodney, I'm so glad to have you here.
I am so glad to be here. And so glad to see you. I'm just excited. I'm just excited about just being here to share my journey, to share my story, and hope that my story, my journey, my healing uh, process will help someone. That's my goal, is to always be an advocate and to maybe touch a listener uh, to understand that this is a process. Um, there is a solution, and people do change. So yeah, so I'm excited.
Oh, great. So can you share your story with us and share some of the challenges you had during that time?
As you stated in 1997, I made a decision with the help of the criminal justice system to seek help for my substance abuse. And along that journey, I was given some tools and I gained information and knowledge about some of my other behaviors that was associated with my substance abuse. And if I go back a little bit, I grew up in a home where I saw domestic violence. I saw abuse on a daily basis. Well, let me take that back. Maybe not on a daily basis, but it was regular,
Enough that it made an impact and impression on your life, right? So,
very much so. As I began to grow older or mature, I remember my mom having this talk with me and telling me and asking me to promise her, that I would never ever abuse my girlfriends or my wife. And I remember it, and that promise, it was a sincere promise because it hurt me when I would see my mom get abused, uh, when things did not go my dad way. Uh, I saw this, you know, and as I got older, I tried to defend my mom. I would, try to fight him. Although, being adolescent, very little impact, but I did what I did because I saw the pain and my mom and the suffering. Putting her out of the house, just dragging her around, all this horrible stuff. And so as I got older, I started, dating and in high school. And after I finished high school, my mom sit me down and she told me, asked me, we were just talking. My mom was always my best friend and I could talk to her about anything. And she told me, she asked me to promise that I would never do that. And I really sincere when I told her, Mom, I would never do that. I would never ever and I really meant it. I knew in my heart, I meant it because, but I'm getting emotional now because last week was Mother's Day and I don't have my mom. And so I made this promise that I wouldn't do it. And one day I looked in the mirror and I was just like my dad, and I did it. I let my mom down.
Right.
And I became this horrible man that I grew to hate. And I know that I'm not supposed to hate. I know, but because of the things that he did to my mom, I began to hate my father. And then, you know, you know, my first marriage, it was constant when things didn't go my way, when I didn't get money to go buy drugs, or I would find any kind of excuse if my food wasn't done, if this wasn't done, or whatever the case, I would find excuses to be abusive. I had no communication skills, no coping skills, nothing. It was just my way or abuse. And that went on and that went on. I can remember even after leaving, going up on her job. It's something, if I call her and something, and I would go up on her job and abuse her. I mean, it was horrible when I look back. It was just horrible. And I remember one night I came home and I told her, I said, Mary, you're going to have to leave. And she's like, what have you taken? What are you on? I said, I haven't had anything today. I said, but I don't know. I've had a moment of clarity. I didn't know anything about that terminology until I got the treatment. I said, you have to leave. We're not, this is not going anywhere. There's no future. I remember an incident, and I'm going to paraphrase, but I remember an incident. She told me, you'll never see your son. And I remember getting so angry, and to the point that I emptied out a bottle of dishwashing detergent liquid, and went to the local gas station and proceeded to get some gas, and proceeded to go to her home and set the house on fire.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I watch the news a lot. I've seen people die in house fires. I've seen a lot of horrible things happen. Thank God nothing happened, because it would have changed the trajectory of my life, my future, my vision that God gave me. All of that probably wouldn't have transpired. And so, as I continue that journey, and seeking, just trying to find myself. There was every road I went down was a dead end, and I want to just kind of be in the mindset of how I used to be and when I was.
Right.
We have a tendency to present ourselves very well.
Right. Very charming in the beginning. Yes.
Caring, the protector. None of these signs really pop up in the beginning of the relationship, my relationships. I'm a charismatic guy. I'm very romantic and all that stuff on the front end. That was my MO. After we dated for about couple of years, maybe a year and a half, I proposed to her. Through the whole thing, there was no arguments. There was no signs that he's an abuser.
Right.
After we got married, maybe 6 months, it reared its ugly head. And it got worse, and it got worse.
Well, let me ask you, why did it take that long? Because I know I'm the reverse end of that. it didn't show up till, about 4 months after we were married, and I didn't see any really signs. So, what for you was the thing that made was there an event or just something along the way that you decided you didn't have to hide some certain aspect? What was that? Because I think a lot of times we're very curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I, think about it, I knew one thing that I had secured my prize or whatever, right? I had conquered that for the lack of it. Maybe I felt this thick thought of ownership. She's mine now. She's not going anywhere. So I don't have to put up this facade anymore, and like I said, now I'm thinking that it had to be an event that triggered, you know. Even with substance abuse, we talk about we educate and give the men tools to recognize what triggers. Because if you can recognize your triggers when that triggers occur, then you can control it,
Right.
and use your tools that you've been given to overcome that. Because it will surpass, it will go away, whatever that trigger, whether or not my clothes wasn't clean. Well, you wash your own clothes today, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's what happened. It was an event that triggered something. One of the things I know that was one of my major triggers, if I did not get money from her when I wanted
Right.
something like that, because I would always, spend all my money up. And so therefore, when I wanted to get high again, well, it's always easier when it's someone in your home versus going out somewhere outside your house or whatever. So I think it had to be an event that triggered that. Where you been? You should have been home an hour ago or 30. Could have went over to our mom's house or something. It had to be an event, a situation that triggered those behaviors.
I know those are learned behaviors. At any time in the back of your head where you just really going, I imagine afterwards you were going, man, that was just like dad, right?
Of course, and you hit the nail right on the head. These was learned behaviors.
Right.
And a lot of times what we have to understand, for those that are listening, that these are subconsciously behaviors or taught behaviors, because you see it, you hear it. And so the mind will record and memorize certain events and certain situations. And as soon as something similar to that, then you react the same way. Because I've never seen my grandparents argue or fight or anything.
Mhm.
So why didn't I learn that behavior? Because I spent a lot of time with them, but I was at home more, and I watched it and I saw it. And so I've learned over the years, a lot of my behaviors was learned behaviors. And that was one of the things we were talking about earlier. You know, my goal is, I want to break that generational curse, because I don't want my son to become me.
Right.
And Rodney and I have had conversations about my past abuse and things of that nature. And I told him, I said, the bottom line, Dad just didn't have the tools. I didn't have information, because I know that I can control my behavior. Anything I do is controllable. I make a decision, whether good, bad, or indifferent, to do whatever. I have choice today to make those decisions. I mean, more healthier decisions in life, because that's not the solution. And the reason why I know today is because this month I celebrate 27 years of non-abuse behavior. So I know that there's hope. I know that there's this possibility.
Absolutely. So what was the event that was the turning point for you?
Recovery process, what it does is allow you to really look at yourself. It has you to look at your past behaviors. It's a 12-step program, and the first three steps is about he can't, I can, I think I'll let it. I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. And then the fourth step is where you really dive into your past history or your past life. And what you do is you're taking an inventory. It's just like in a supermarket or whatever, a business. Things that are not valuable, you have to get rid of. Well, the abusive behavior, stuff, those I couldn't, they're not going to be usable anymore.
Right.
And so I started learning skills about communication. There was family therapy groups and things of that nature. And then as you continue those steps, there's a part where you have to make an amends. Let's say to your victims.
Right.
It's hard on one end, but it's freeing on another end. You being free from this bondage that has been holding you back. And it's such an amazing process. So what I learned was how to communicate my feelings. If you hurt my feelings, I can say, well, sweetheart, when you said those things, it hurt my feelings. And normally the response from my wife or whoever is like, that wasn't my intention. And a lot of time it's the way we interpret words or how we interpret things. So I had that. Then I had some support groups. I had other men that had struggled with the same thing. And so we
Mm-hmm.
had, process groups where we would talk about things to help us heal as a group. And we did check-ins. And so there were so many tools I was given to help me with that process. And I began to see myself getting better, or I saw myself beginning to heal from that. And the first part I had to do of that process was forgive myself.
Right.
And so that was my journey towards reforming and changing who I was.
If I can, like, how difficult was the forgiveness journey on the end of, like, maybe your children and that kind of thing? How was that process for you?
It was difficult because as a parent, you want to have this image. First of all, you want your kids to respect you
Right.
and look up to you and things of that nature. And so with that piece, it was difficult. It was weird because when Rodney was like 17 or 18, he was acting out at home. By this time, Mary and Rodney had moved up to Albuquerque. And so as around about his junior year, he started acting out. His behavior started acting out. I found out he was heavily drinking and things of this nature. And at the time, I hadn't got to where I needed to be in my journey, but I'm seeing signs my son is headed down the same path of his father.
Right.
Because as we stated earlier, it's a learned behavior. And he was young when he saw when I was in my full-blown addiction. But even at an early age, studies show that kids do remember a lot of things. And so I know that it had an impact. He didn't understand his father was living in one state, and him and his mom was in another state, and she had remarried. And so round about his senior year, she made the decision to put him on a bus and send him to Houston to be with me. But when he landed, we was buddies. It wasn't a father and son thing. It was just we was buddies, because I'm still, I'm by this time I'm getting close to the end of my road because a few months later I get arrested, and so that's going to lead me to treatment. And by then, Barbara and I, we had separated. So Rodney and I was just kind of living together. We just buddies or whatever, you know. And so it was important. And I'm seeing this behavior. I'm seeing my son, you know, seeing how his dad is behaving, and he's picking up on some of this stuff. And so when I went to treatment, that was, you know, that was an opportunity for me to begin to kind of work on myself, and to
Right.
begin to be the father that, first of all, he needed, and the father that I should have always been. My mom was an enabler, you know, bless her heart. I mean, she didn't know. She thought she was just taking care and loving her son, you know. And even with that, I can remember young ladies would call the house, and start to share with my mom some of my behaviors. And I know my mom would say stuff like, you know, whatever he does out in them streets, I don't want to know about it, and things like that. Instead of just listening to them,
Right.
that's what she would do. And every time, like holidays, I mean, Christmas and things, even if I didn't have any money to buy presents, my name was associated, was attached to the present that Rodney got. So he felt that it was really coming from his dad, but it was really coming from his grandmother. And so I think for me was seeing that my son might end up, and that scared me, because I did not want that. Even though I knew I had issues, I had problems, and I didn't know how to change, I didn't want him to be like me.
Well, we always want better for our children, don't we? We want better lives and better relationships, and
Right.
so it's hard time at times to provide that if you don't know anything other than what you learned in a behavior
Yeah.
that is generational. Like you said, that generational curse. How do you provide that? You don't really know until something you have a catalyst that brings you forward to where you have to move forward and seek something other than what you learned. And I mean, I had the same thing generationally within my family. And the catalyst is the death of my daughter. And then we had to learn how to seek something other than what we learned. And it changes the whole dynamic, especially when God comes into play with it. Because when God puts you on that path in that journey, then it's a whole other ball game
Yes, it
because
is.
then it's His will and not your own anymore.
Right.
So, and I
Yeah.
know you've had that experience with your journey.
I mean, when you shared it, I'm over here. I got goosebumps, because without God intervening in my life, I don't know where I would be. I really don't know where I would be. And so when that happened, you know, part of that journey, and you know, I was sharing, and I gave you guys a shout out. I was on a live radio show yesterday, and I gave you guys a shout out. But when God gave me the vision and intervened in my life, I knew that my purpose was to help men to overcome the substance, and also because, believe it or not, the statistics are very high that most abusers either are alcoholics, drug addicts.
Yes.
It's very high. So that's a common component. And so when the journey began, I started, you know, seeking help for that. There's a lady, her name is Sheila Bush. Uh, Technically, her title was probation officer, but really, this lady was a guardian angel that God put in my life. When I trace back the history, that was put into my life to put me on another pathway
Right.
to serenity, you know. And so the last 27 years, I'll call her Sunday, every May the 19th. I give her a call wherever I'm at, to thank her for being in my life and protecting me and guiding me. And the thing is, God is so awesome. He will reveal certain mysteries to us if we
Yes.
are in tune and connected. And so one day I beginning to work in the substance abuse facility, and one of the ladies that I was working with, there was an article. I said, Miss Bernice, I want to show you this picture. This lady saved my life, and and all this. And when I showed her, the article, and she said, Mr. Rodney, she said, that's my sister. I said, what? She said, yes, my sister. So she called her sister and said, hey, you're not gonna believe this, Sheila. I work with Rodney Owens. She said, really? And she proceeded to tell her sister that during that time, she saw something in me when I didn't even see it myself.
Right.
I knew God was up to something. I didn't know what he was up to, but I knew he was up to something, and we started this journey, and it's been amazing. I mean, I shared this story. There's a gentleman, his name was Dwayne, and Dwayne was an abuser, and
Right.
he came to our program, had a beautiful wife, beautiful kids, and he changed his life. He changed his life, and I remember his wife name was Valerie, and but anyway, Dwayne um, came to the program, had been in a lot of programs. Something happened when he came to Pathway. And I remember Valerie calling and came by, and she was talking to Barbara and I. Because see, one of the Barbara components, she stands in the gap for these women, these mothers and everything, because she's been there. She's
Oh,
been
yeah.
there. So she knows their story, and so we was talking. She said, I don't know what you guys done, but he has changed. He's been to so many programs. No programs have ever helped him. And I remember Dwayne telling me how important it was to get back with his family. But because of Valerie past, as far as getting involved with men, uh, abusive men, let me put it like that. She got in this relationship and she told this guy, "Hey, listen, the children dad is I need to try to work on it." And he went over, and I remember Dwayne was still with us, and he had put in for a pass request that weekend. He said, "I'm gonna go this weekend and spend with the kids," and the kids all had biblical names, Faith, and I mean, it was just. But anyway, this guy lured Dwayne over there, and he held the whole family hostage, and he
Yeah.
killed one by one,
Oh,
and he
that's
left
horrible.
Dwayne for last. He wanted him to witness all of that. And the thing is that that's the horror of domestic violence, being silenced, not speaking up, not seeking help, not letting someone know what is going on.
Right.
She wanted to change. She wanted to begin to rebuild this life that they had. And it because of this gentleman, he stole that from he stole that from him. And that it only made me it really it angered me, but it motivated me to reach out and try to help more men, because we have to change, guys. We have to do better. We are better. We just have to have the tools, the information, you know, uh, to make those changes. No, it's not going to happen overnight, because we didn't get here overnight. We wasn't abusive, so it's going to take some time. It's going to take a, process. What's so amazing also, Tara, I remember a friend of mine's knew of my journey, knew of my life, my story. And she said, Rodney, I want to feature your story in my magazine. I'm like, yeah, yeah, I want to always be an advocate. I want to be a voice for the voiceless and things of that nature. So she wrote the story, and so she took some of the copies to her Bible study. women Bible study, and one of the ladies in the Bible study was my first sister-in-law. And
Yes.
so when she read the story, she said, I know him. She said, well, how you know Rodney? She said, trust me, I know him. And so she shared the magazine with Mary, and and so a few months later, I get a call from Rodney. And Rodney said, hey, Dad, you on the way to your office? I'm like, yeah, dude, I go in every day.
Right.
He said, okay. He said, okay, Dad. Well, I'll talk to you later. I'll call you later. I didn't connect the dots. And so later on that day, I went to pick up some baseball tickets from a friend of mine, and to take the guys to the baseball game, take our community, the men. And so Barbara called me. She said, Rod, she said, Mary's here. I'm like, why is my first wife
Yeah, at the door, right? Yeah.
right? I'm like, really, so she said, well, when you get here, act surprised. So I walked in, act surprised. And so she told me to sit down. So she started discussing, her mom had asked them, when she passed, she wanted them to give back to a nonprofit organization and everything. And she said, the family voted. We chose you. I'm like, oh,
Wow,
I
what
said,
a
well, thank you.
testament. Yeah.
Yeah. And it gets better. So, I'm sitting there asking, and she said, well, it was from the article. She knew of my journey because I did the men's with her, and it went so well. And she was telling me, hey, listen, I forgive you. Um, I'm proud of you. And all that. So that piece went well. And it's amazing how that went because I was so excited because I was on fire for the program, 12-step program. I said, I need to call and make an amends. He said, no, slow down. God will reveal to us when that time comes. And and I understood when the time came because it went so smoothly. Sometimes I've heard stories that they don't go smoothly, but this went so smoothly. It was just, it blew me away. So
Right.
anyway, long story short, she said, well, the family sit down and we decided to, donate the pathway. And so upon that, they would come out every Christmas and buy gifts for all the men. They would make a big dinner, Christmas dinner. And so one of my guys came to me one day. He said, Miss Owens, the first time, he said, Miss Owens, he said, can I have a minute with you? I said, yes. He said, listen, I've never seen anything like that. I said, what are you talking about? He said, the first wife and the current wife baking Christmas cookies and laughing and talking.
Yeah.
I said, no, I haven't either, but that's the power of God. That's the power of forgiveness, right? He can do that. And I remember one year I pointed over to my son. I said, see your mom, she's so happy. He said, yeah. I said, this is what she always wanted. It's just that we have two separate families now, but we can still be up under the same roof and be happy, And so I know what can happen if you allow yourself to get the tools. First, I think one of the first steps to being reformed or changing, you have to admit that you was an abuser.
Right.
It you inflicted this or you caused this, you done it. That's the first step because
Yeah, there's
for
a
me,
amount of accountability, right? That has to.
because prior to that, you could not, I would deny everything. I didn't do that. I love you. And that's what, we talked about at the symposium.
Yes.
After I would abuse my wives, I love you. I'll never do it again.
Mhm.
They will, we will, it will happen again. But I think abusers have to say no, no more, it's over with. That first inkling of that sign of that behavior, you have to address it. It's
Right.
not going to not go away until that person make a decision to get some help. And I think probably, when I look back, I'm sure my wife would have said, you know what, this is over, or if you don't seek any help. But neither one said that. It
Hmm.
was never discussed to get help. It was like, okay, well, he just going through something, or he was just whatever, maybe it's the drug. I don't know what they're
Well, and
thinking
women
of.
try to usually take it on themselves, something they did, something that we triggered this in you. And so if we perform better, and like you said, sometimes it's easier to do that than to just come out and go, this has to stop. Or because then you're afraid of what the next consequence is if you do that. So yeah, my husband Jim, you met Jim at the symposium. I asked him a couple of times, like, why do men do that sometimes? He said, sometimes men are just, we all have this inner little boy inside of us that we get away with whatever we're allowed to get away with.
Yes.
And so, not, in some realms, I think of that sometimes in my own abusive situation. Like, it really didn't stop until I said that we can't do that any further. So that I had to put an end to the marriage on that level. So,
And but another thing, what I want the listeners to understand, those are out there that may be suffering or experiencing abuse, is that there's all forms of it. It's just the physical is kind of like that's the last step. There's mental, there's verbal, but yeah, I mean, there's so many levels, and so when we see the mental, the part of that, verbal, not communicating or shutting down, not talking. Hey, honey, whatever, that's it starts very little. Just like we teach our guys, resentment is all it is a ill feeling. I mean, you can get a resentment, somebody step on your toe. I mean,
right.
it doesn't have to be rage. So we have to be able to look at the signs up front and in close, and address them. We have to, God even used me to be part of my church marriage ministry. I remember telling my pastor, I said, I've done a lot of bad things. He said, no, God can use you. You're the perfect person for this ministry. And
Yes.
so with the communication piece, because women are wired different, they think faster than, so we was taught to kind of the men. I teach when we separate, when I go with the men and whatever, I said, we got to slow that process down. You have to kind of stop and say, okay, so I'm hearing you say this, because what happens is when men are just overwhelmed, thinking that they losing communication, it's just communication talk. Then they want to shut down, they want to scream, they want to holler, whatever the case. I'm done. I don't want to talk anymore. Well, that's a form of abuse too. So slow the process. So what I'm hearing you say is that when I finish eating, don't sit my dish in the sink, put it in the dishwater, but rinse it first. Okay, I can do that instead of hearing say, well, you always trying to tell me what to do. I'm not no kid. Well, that's not what she said. So we have to kind of be able to learn skills of communication.
Right.
I think that's a very helpful tool for us men.
Absolutely. So now you've started this organization and you're helping men to recover and stuff. So what does it look like when a man starts that process of recovery and journey through what you do?
First, denial. I think that, once we get through that part, because it's like doing it for my wife made me come, or the company made me come, or whatever, they come with it. So we see that on the front end. Okay.
Oh, I
So
imagine. Yeah.
so we say, okay, well, let's kind of move past the denial part. And so let's kind of look at some of your behaviors, because drugs and alcohol it's just the symptom. It's not the problem. It's just a symptom of the problem. Let's get down to the core issue. What are the cause and the effects when you use and things of that nature? And I once again, I think once I share my story that I was once just like you guys. I mean, because my stories, when I get honest, I went because of my options wasn't very good. If I didn't go to treatment, they said I was going to go to prison. Well, I'm smart enough to know not to, that's not a good option. Okay, well, let's take option A instead of option B. So there's a part, there's information, we call it pre-contemplation stages, where they're kind of bargaining, wanting to be there, not wanting to be there, blaming somebody for putting them there. Because you hear the stories like, oh, the judge. No, the judge didn't send you here. It was a recommendation, but I think your dirty UA is what led you to, because without your using, you would have never met the judge. If you were following the judge's orders, you would have never had to be suggested to come to recovery centers and things of that nature. And once that you get past that, they start being open-minded to knowing that there is a solution to their problem, because a lot of men think that, okay, my willpower, I can just stop. I just never, well, no, you can't do it like that. Or, I can control it, or it's just so many different excuses I think that we use in the beginning. I'm doing it for my wife, or I'm doing it whatever, for whoever, and things. I'm doing it for my kids and things like that. And so once you begin to accept the ownership, that I believe starts your healing process. And it's really amazing. We have certain assignments. We have a goodbye letter to your drug of choice. It's like writing a goodbye letter. And a lot of times I explain to them, it's like, it's like being in a bad relationship and said, writing a Dear John, say it's over. And then we asked them to write their obituary. And that really freaks them out. I'm like,
Oh,
obituary? I
I
said,
imagine so.
yes.
Yeah.
I said, we want to know what people going to say in the parking lot, not in the church, because the pastor's going to say a lot of wonderful things. But we want to, because once you walk through the door pathway, now you have begun to rewrite your obituary. And I share my story with him. I'm like, if I would have died in my addiction, it would have went like he was an abuser, he was a drug addict, and he did all these horrible things. But today I help men to recover from substance abuse. I help men to recover from domestic violence. I'm very active in my church, in the community. We have a food pantry. We do a lot of wonderful things. I said, also we just I think it was since we talked, the city of Houston gave us a proclamation for the great work we do at Pathway to Serenity. So every April the 30th is Pathway to Serenity Day in the city of Houston. So
well,
it's just,
congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's just amazing the work that we do, and being recognized, just like what you do, that's your gift, what you're doing. That was God's vision. It just so happened you lost your angel, but God has put this vision on you and Jim to carry out, to get the message out. And the same with me with the substance abuse and domestic violence. That's our calling. And and we're champions at it. And I think I tell my guys all the time, God is not coming down from heaven and say, stop that, don't do drugs, stop that, don't do domestic violence. That's not right. Okay, because that's my child too, that you're hurting. But what he does is he uses us. He speaks through us to speak to you guys. And what you're doing, you're getting in the message out to know that, yes, you have to.
Absolutely. You're giving them the message. You're trying to give them the tools. You're trying to give them the wherewithal to make the change. Right?
Exactly.
Yes. So, lastly, what advice would you give to, you know, the men out there, women as well, as if they're in an abusive relationship? What's the best advice you would give somebody who's still struggling and maybe debating whether or not to do some kind of a recovery program?
My advice is to reach out to someone, talk to someone, whether it's your clergyman, whether it's a good friend, uh, someone that you can, we call a closed mouth friend, someone that's not going to judge, someone that's not going to be opinionated. And, but you have to, you have to break the silence. You cannot not speak about it. You can't, and it doesn't matter if you're poor or rich. I've I've worked with and consulted with uh, certain corporations and news outlets where professional baseball players, uh, a gospel singer, uh, so it touches everybody. But we
Yes, it
have
does.
to speak up. You have to speak up. I believe, if certain things was done in the beginning, would have made some changes in my life. Now, Barbara, she put her foot. She said, "No, we're not doing this. This is not going to happen." And Barbara always tell me, "Not you tell the story. Come on, tell it right now." Barbara will defend herself. Barbara, she's not a pushover, and but she got to a point said, "You know what? I deserve better. And if
Right.
you don't, get yourself together, then it's not gonna be a us, And so you have to, speak up. You have to let your voice be heard to someone. There's so many organizations that call because we men, we want you to think that it's nothing going on. It's nothing wrong with what's happening. And then we'll get to the point where we want to silence you through whether it's, uh, let's say it's gifts, let's say it's money, let's say, I don't want to mess up this good thing because I'm being provided for. Whatever the case is I was very manipulative. I used certain things to control that narrative, whatever I knew that, it would take. And so be aware of that. You had to be aware of these behaviors, and the only way you will be able to get some insight is to reach out to these organizations, speak up when you see it, even if you're wrong. It's okay. It's
Right.
okay to be wrong. At least you'll have the information that, no, that's not what that is. That's just like sometimes, when we do random urinalysis, the guys, well, I haven't used, I'm saying, well, I'd rather be wrong than right. There's something that triggered us to want to do it. It's your behavior, your pattern, something you did to trigger us to think, well, let's just be on the safe side.
Right.
And so I encourage anyone, men and women, to reach out to organizations, um, talk to someone that you can trust, and that's going to be honest and transparent with you and tell you the truth. Every one of us have that one person.
Absolutely. I always love to tell young people, and it applies to anybody getting into a relationship. We talk more about how in love we are with that person, how beautiful they are, the qualities we're looking as far as the person visually, but we don't have the conversations of, I always encourage them to have the conversations of, these are the deal breakers for me in a relationship.
Yes,
On
yes,
both ends, this is the
right,
deal breakers for me, and then but don't present them if you're not willing to stand by them as the deal
yes,
breaker.
Right.
So that's I think part of the key. It opens the communication lines to that point.
Hmm.
And it isn't like in relationships, that sometimes something will happen where a deal breaker may get crossed, but then you're able to come at it and go, look, you know, you have to make the determination whether to forgive or not, and whether or not it gets crossed again if that line gets crossed. But many people, I didn't have that conversation until my second marriage, and
Right.
we both did sit down. I think it's one of the best things we ever did was to have that conversation of, this is a line that can't be crossed with me. Okay, this is a line that can't be crossed with me. And if you really truly love that person, then sometimes it's just like, I've heard people sit there and say, oh, I can't be with a smoker, but he's a smoker, and then he says, but I won't quit smoking. Well, then why are you staying in a relationship if you don't want to be with a smoker? You know what I'm saying? It's that kind of a, but if you stay in the relationship and then you expect them to change, it's not going to work. So those kinds of conversations, having those, like, because everybody in their family, everybody's family wants to act like their backgrounds don't stink, like this didn't happen in our background, in our family. Yeah, it happened in your family too. They just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
But those are the things you got to overcome and go, no, I saw these things happen. I don't want this in my relationship. And
Right.
more than just saying that, you got to really work on it and actively. Otherwise, it just becomes the instinct of the norm we keep walking through. And we've both experienced that in our family lives. So it's just part of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that, having that. And sometimes it's a hard conversation, but it's a needed conversation on the front end. Hey, these are deal breakers. I mean, look up, you can take them home and, and study them, whatever you need to do. And if there's any of them you're not willing to commit to, then, hey, we'll just go our separate ways, because like you said, those conversations are not talked about, and it's so
Hmm.
valuable to be talked about. Yeah. And it's a process, and I know that, people, I'm a living witness. People do change, but you the person has to want to change, and we can't, you know uh, think that it's going to happen overnight. It is a process, and and the person has to be willing to do the work. I was willing to do the work because I wasn't raised like that. Although I wasn't raised that way. And I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to
Right.
be a better husband. I wanted to be a better father. I see a therapist, and so I was some friends of mine. So what's wrong? Why are you? Well, I want to be a better version of me. Life is great, but I want to be better. And so, there's nothing wrong with having another professional that I can go talk to, and and point out certain things, because as I continue this journey of life with my lifelong partner, I want to be better.
Mhm.
Yes, we've overcome a lot. We really, really have. And our stories, our truth. We're transparent. We're not, in denial about that. And we
Exactly.
want to bear witness to others. Yes. But if it doesn't, she was going her separate way. But I made a conscious decision that she meant more to me to not be willing to do the work to change the person that I used to be, you know.
Mhm.
And it's amazing I was able to allow my mom before she passed away to witness that. And so I was able to honor that promise that I told her.
Right.
Yeah, I just wasn't able, but before, I was able to do that, and I know that she was very happy and very pleased with me as a son. Um, and so I see, even with my son, how patient he is with his wife, and things like that. Um, and so we're well on our way of breaking that curse, you know. And my thing is, even with my nephews, you know, it's important for me to demonstrate, and they know, a lot of my nieces, they know our story, and to see, you know, their uncle where he is today, you know. And so a lot of times they'll have me talk to their boyfriends or their husbands and things like that. You know, it's what's really amazing how God, we had some neighbors, the neighbors going through it, and for whatever reason, they reached out to us. And it was, and I know it was based on our walk and
Right.
the way we are, and it was, you know, and it just blew me away. And so whenever it would happen, we would be the first one to call. They would call and say, you know, Robert is acting out, Robert is doing this. And I told him one day, I said, you know, you need to stop making excuses. You know, you always want to blame it on her. It's not her. It's not her. It's you. And you need to take ownership for your behavior. And yeah, she had to end up leaving him, but I mean, in her life, just started to just get better and better. She went back to college, she graduated. I mean, life is great, you know. And but she had to make that decision, you know, and it was just amazing. Barbara would counsel with her. I was, you know, this what you're doing is wrong, you know. These kids are seeing it, and it's not right, you know, and stuff like that. And they would even reach out. So um, we know that there's hope. And I think for us, as you continue the work that you do on your end, and I will continue, and we're gonna continue to have, because I think now it's getting, there's more organizations, there's more information out there versus where it used to be, let's say 10 or 20 years ago. And so
Absolutely.
the more we use our platforms, and be honest with you, the state of Texas is, I have to say, it's a substance abuse. It's a ministry. It's
Absolutely. I always like to say, you know, we're trying to, we were talking about what we're producing. So, like, we want to produce a better fruit, not a bitter fruit, right?
yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah. So you know, and the key ingredient with that is just is love. Even when women reach out to you, I mean, the first step is nurture them with love, you know, and because there's no work, there won't be any progress. There's nothing we can do in our, I know, in my work, until I gain your trust, or you allow me to earn your trust. Once that happens, then we can start working on some things and stuff like that, you know. So it always starts with that. But the key ingredient is love, you know,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
they know and they sense that, you know. And so yeah, we're gonna continue to stay on the front line of this, because I've seen what it does when people don't get the help, or people don't speak up. And I've heard a lot of stories, what
Hmm.
happens. But then I've heard stories when they do get the information and they're willing to do the work. And it's trust me, I'm still working. Um, it's a day by day thing. If I didn't do it yesterday, I repeat what I did yesterday today, and I think I'll be okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Rodney, so much for taking the time and sharing your story. We'll definitely have to keep in touch more often because yes,
We're
absolutely.
connected by the hips now for life. Tell Jim, you have amazing guy in your life.
Oh, yeah.
I love seeing you guys interact. I really do.
Well, we love you and your wife as well. So, yes, absolutely. So, for the listeners out there, if you want more information, we'll have it down in the description for Rodney and his organization, what they do. If you want more information, how you can contact them. And we thank you for watching this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.